Hello everybody and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, the very funny comedian Clair Haus. Yay! Hello! How are you? Are you all right?
Great, nice to see you. It's too hot for my liking.
It is a very, very warm day, but I'm delighted that you've taken time out to do this today. I really am.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
The interview is going to be about an hour long, 45 minutes to an hour long. And the first question I'd like to ask you is, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
Well, that's a pretty long story. And so I would argue maybe I'm still not one.
No, you made me laugh very much.
I started... I started doing Second City in Toronto when I was a teenager. And so I started in sort of sketch and improv stuff and was never really, didn't even engage with the idea of being a stand-up because doing something by myself just seemed too scary. So it's been a long, arduous process of accepting that I'm going to be a bit of a tit on stage.
Well, I'm so glad you've accepted.
Finally.
What I love about your style of comedy is you just run out and it's like, I'm not leaving the stage until this audience are laughing, and you run around and it's so enthusiastic to watch. It's wonderful to see. So did you first do your comedy in Canada then, or have you always been based in Britain?
I did sketch and improv in Canada,
right,
on and off, and it's sort of just been an ongoing dance. And I moved to England I was living in Latin America, and I moved here as kind of an acceptance of like, okay, this is actually what I want to do. I've been delaying it too long. Let's do it. And so I've only been doing stand-up for about, if you count the pandemic, 3 years.
Right.
And I just started doing it here. So. Right.
So when you were over here, did you start in little pubs doing 5-minute sets and things like that, and you bringing friends along?
Oh yeah. And I still will sometimes, people don't know who I am really, so I'll still can go and do a 5-spot somewhere sometimes.
It's good.
But yeah, I did the normal thing. Luckily my first gig over here went really nicely. I think if it had been a bomb, I'm not sure if I would have been so excited about it, but the first one went well. And then after that one, I was like, okay, you're going to do 100 before you make a decision as to whether you're going to continue this. And of course, as a lot of stand-ups will know, by the time you get to 100, you're locked in and you're obsessed with it. So
yeah. You just keep going. And I think the key is as well is all about experience. I always say to the comedians on the blog, whether you have good or bad gigs, it all counts as experience, and it makes you a better comedian, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. And of course, you'll learn more from the bad ones than you do from the good ones, right?
Yeah.
And the more challenging ones. So if you walk into a room and there's, you're expecting it to be a big audience, but it's 2 guys with ZZ Top beards who don't want to hear what you have to say, you have to make it work.
I can't ever imagine that happening.
Well,
yeah, clearly it has. When
getting up and
yeah. Where was your first ever gig then? Was it in London or?
I guess, but I mean, first ever gig would have probably been stuffing a pillow up myself and standing in front of my parents, just standing between them and the television with sound makeup on. I think that would be a gig, although I had no material. I remember when I was like 15, I was in my mother put me in some very ill-advised sort of modeling program, not because I was going to be a model, but because she wanted me to walk less like an ogre, I think.
Right.
and part of that was like, there was a some kind of talent show where you had to choose what you wanted to do. And I remember choosing stand-up for some weird reason,
right,
and doing 5 minutes, I don't know on what, with a feather boa on. And I remember getting off stage and going to my mother and going, it felt really good. The microphone belongs in my hand, which she must have just been like, my child is an asshole. But that, I suppose technically that was the first time I did stand-up. And then it was years and years later, a friend of mine who I'd done sketch with in Canada, we challenged one another to do a 5-spot just off the cuff. And it wasn't really stand-up that I did some kind of character comedy thing. But what was the first gig here, I think, was some basement in Dalston. I can't remember what it was.
Classic.
It was like the classic cockroaches crawling out from under the stage, bringers who'd been dragged there,
Yeah. But as I say, it's all experience, because you just build up the routine as you go along, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see. Did you ever find it difficult at all to break into comedy? Did you ever have any difficult experiences where did you find it tough in any way, or?
Well, I think it's tough in an ongoing way. You just it's a bit gladiatorial, isn't it? Right. You have to prove yourself every night. I'm not a terribly socially dynamic person. Right. I don't always stay after every gig, like have a bunch of drinks and da da da. I mean, it's too expensive, first of all, but it's not really. I don't hang out that much, which can, I think, a bit more difficult in the early days when it's not cliquey, but there's groups where you kind of push each other on.
Sure.
So it's been a bit more challenging that way, I think. I mean, not overtly. It's just a bit of a long slog. Of course, the pandemic, it felt like I was kind of locked into a nice little roller coaster getting ready to go before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And a lot of those gigs have just kind of evaporated. So it does feel like that's obviously the biggest challenge so far.
Yeah. And
I'm a bit older than a lot of other comics starting, so I feel like, come on, let's get this show on the road. But nothing overtly challenging, I guess.
No. And do you have anything specific you like to talk about on stage? Do you have any themes or anything like that?
I think it's changing and evolving because I've obviously, with only sort of 2.5 years in the game, you haven't really found your voice yet. So I'm starting to I think initially getting on stage, you are sort of pointing at things and going, here's what's funny about this, here's what's funny about that, and trying to be an observational comic. And slowly, as you start engaging with audiences more, you start realizing what it is about you that they find funny. Yeah. And then you become this sort of just filter through which any old thing can go. I tend to not do sort of political stuff. I tend to be a bit sillier, I suppose. But I don't really know yet what I like to talk about.
That's interesting because to find your way on stage, even though you've got your routine written, if you can find ways of expressing yourself that are funnier to an audience, then that's a really interesting answer, because I suppose it works. Well, it does work very well from the times that I've seen you.
Yeah, I guess it's almost like the way I'm starting to see it is you kind of have to I accept my sort of own tragic flaws a little bit more. And the way the world gets processed through that computer is maybe more interesting than any class.
How do you remember all your routines? Do you have a way of remembering them all?
I probably say things aloud to myself more than anyone in the city. Because I'm trying to get to be a bit more improvisational and a bit more off the cuff on stage.
Sure.
And when I started, I was quite script heavy, a bit monologue-y maybe, and I'm trying to move away from that a little bit. But I write things out a lot, and I say things out loud to myself a lot.
Yeah. Do you practice and practice and practice before you go on stage, or do you like the spontaneity of being on stage?
Yeah, I'm trying to be more the latter. So in the first year or so, I would have said my routine to myself like 10 times before going on stage. And nowadays I'm just as the bits are a little bit more locked in.
Yeah.
I feel freer to just go and go a bit off piste, but
yeah.
I'm not that great at it yet. Still learning.
Well, I mean, I can understand you only been going for 3 years, but I was amazed how funny you were when we saw you, and you stood out in the crowd. It was an amazing 10 minutes that you did. Let's move on to Edinburgh. Have you been to the Edinburgh Fringe? Have you performed there at all?
In 2019,
yeah,
I did. It was a three-way split bill,
right?
With my friend Josh Weller, who's very funny,
yeah.
and we're both Susie Priest, and we ended up having a lovely run for I think it was like 2.5 weeks, just upstairs at the Counting House. We
Brilliant.
had a great time. Yeah. I had kind of like steeled myself for a horrible experience, because you see all these mental health posts of like, oh my God, how am I going to make it? So I was like, all right, this is going to be warfare.
Yeah.
But then we just had a lovely time. The place was full.
Yeah.
Everybody had a great time. We had this lovely run. And then it was kind of bookended with So You Think You're Funny happening up there as well. So I haven't really had the full-on Edinburgh experience. I haven't done an hour yet, that's for sure.
No.
But yeah, I got to taste, and I really it's intense, but I liked it.
It's a nice little grounding doing 20 minutes with 2 other people there with you. I think it must be. It's an ideal first show.
Yeah, I think because you, as an early open micer in London, you're just kind of getting whatever you can get, and maybe that's 3 gigs a week, and maybe it's 5 sometimes. But just the business of like essentially getting dressed for work every night and doing it every single night, you get so much quicker. Yeah. So it was great. It was really nice.
I've been extremely fortunate to be able to go to Edinburgh since 2005. My home city is Carlisle, but I've lived in London for 30 years. But I go up to Carlisle as often as I can, and of course Edinburgh is only an hour away from there. And as soon as you step off the train at Waverley, this extraordinary atmosphere hits you, and I see 50 shows in a week, and I'm exhausted after it, but it's just the most extraordinary thing. So I do wish you well there, because I think you would be superb there doing a full solo show.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I guess I don't know if it's going to be next year or
I think this year is very risky, but I think next year it'll be back to normal.
Yeah. But I mean,
as normal as could be.
Like people, sometimes people maybe do an hour before they're potentially ready to do an hour.
Yeah.
So you just don't want to be on that boat.
No. You were a finalist for the So You Think You're Funny competition in 2019. Congratulations. Describe the experience. What's your experience of competitions?
It was great. I mean, I think with competitions, it's really, really lovely to make it through, and it gives you a little boost and it makes you feel good. But I do always tell people who maybe get out and kicked out in the first round or whatever, because you don't make it doesn't mean you're not. Doesn't mean you don't have great potential and you're really good. You may have had an off night. They might not have seen what other people see, whatever. So I think getting to the final is great, but not getting to the final doesn't mean you're not one of the next best comics in the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So It was lovely. It was like I had 3 live heats. The first one was at Backyard Comedy Club in London.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really exciting because to that point, it was the biggest show that I'd done. And then in terms of audience, and then the semifinal, everybody says the semifinal in Edinburgh is like one of the most fun gigs you'll ever do. It's just that there's an energy about it. It's really fun. It's in the Gilded Balloon building. The audience is quite young and up for it. Yeah. And that was really fun. And then the final is a bit more toned down maybe. And it's a completely different room again. So just the process of doing those 3 like punctuation marks over the summer was really a cool experience. And just, there's a bit of a buzz around it and it's quite fun.
Did you feel that becoming a finalist, it gave you a bit more recognition as well? Or did that not seem the case?
I don't know. I think I didn't notice it.
No.
That much into it's a great thing to have on the resume.
Yeah.
And you can kind of introduce yourself and people will see that maybe you might be able to give a good show.
Yeah.
But I didn't notice anything overtly change.
No. I
have to say.
Interesting. Yeah. To date, I've seen you on many an occasion.
I think it gave me a bit of difficulty.
Yeah.
Do we have a?
Are we all right? Yeah. I think we're okay. Are we?
I think we have maybe a slight delay, but it's okay.
A slight delay, but I think it's come back, so I can always edit that last little bit out. Let's move on. To date, I've seen you live for our friend Vix Layton for her gigs and really enjoyed your wonderful performances. Please, can you describe your writing process and where you get your ideas from? If you have a writing process, because a lot of comedians don't.
No, I think it's an ever evolving thing, isn't it? I mean, you have your notebook and keeping even remembering past bits I've done. It's a struggle for me because I'll get obsessed with whatever I'm doing right this week, this minute, and then I completely forget something else I was working on. Process. A lot of waking up in the middle of the night and making iPhone notes. I tend to just, if I have a topic I know I want to talk about, I'll just turn on my iPhoto video on my computer and just like ramble about it for a while until I stumble on something that's funny about it and then maybe hone in on that. But really, I don't know what my process is. But I don't write on stage generally. I'm too anal and neurotic to do my writing on stage. So.
No, that's fine. Wherever I've seen you as well, you always appear very confident and fearless with an audience. Do you suffer from any nerves before you go on stage, and how do you cope with them? Terrible nerves.
Wow. I have horrible stage fright. Really bad. Like I couldn't in university, I couldn't make a presentation. I couldn't answer. I've skipped and missed classes and did badly in certain courses because the teacher would ask too many questions. I hate it.
Wow. Well, that's really surprised me.
There's I don't know if you've ever gone skiing. Have you ever gone skiing? Well, there's a what's his name? There's like a Swiss guy who teaches skiing, and he has these videos. Essentially, when you're skiing, and you're nervous about it, if the more nervous you are, the worse of a skier you're going to be. And so when you're at the top of the hill, they say you have to face the valley, face the danger, and you're a better skier if you push yourself forward in your boots and lean into the boots and like push yourself into the valley. If that makes any sense.
No, I can understand.
So I think about that as an analogy quite a lot. It's like the harder you go out, the easier it is a little bit. Although I think I am getting quite loud these days.
Wow. But
so, yeah.
I find that amazing that you appear so confident when you're there. Do you think that once you're on stage, it all goes and you've got them, or once you're away, you're okay?
Usually it does, and most of the time it does. There's only been one time at a very strange afternoon Edinburgh gig where everyone was just drunk and not very friendly that my nerves continued throughout the set.
Yeah, that's awful.
You know, when people, there are some faces as a comedian where they're just burned in your memory. Someone looking at you like, girl looking at me like I'm giving her an unwanted abortion. Just, it's just an afternoon comedy show. Chill out. It's not that. Anyway, what was the question? The question was nerves? Wait.
Yeah, nerve, confidence, because the point is you appear very, very confident. And is it at the point of when you start your routine, do you think all the nerves go?
All right. They usually do. Usually do. Although I had an opening joke for a while that's about to do with something I'm wearing, and I'm trying, and it works very well. But I'm trying to get rid of that. So now I don't have quite as strong an opening as I maybe used to. And so that makes me a bit more nervous. But no, I don't know. I think there's this weird dichotomy of like having absolutely no confidence and having all the confidence in the world that a lot of comics also have. Where it depends what second you get me. It tends to be a bit of a fake it till you make it a scenario where I just like go out and bluster onto the stage, and then by the time I've realized that I'm on stage, I am actually blustering around and people are okay with it.
What is funny as well is when you mentioned the skiing analogy. When I was at college, I was the double of Eddie the Eagle Edwards, and I used to get that all the time. So I look exactly like him. So I went skiing, and I couldn't do it, but I did exactly what you said, and just threw yourself at it, and it seemed to be okay. You know, once I would get going.
It's hard to do. But I find it's a good analogy for so many things, because you have to just press yourself into what seems the most dangerous, and that is what gives you more control, which I think is probably true in most scenarios.
Exactly, yeah. You've performed stand-up comedy, let me get this right, in Toronto, London, Chicago, Berlin, Bogota, and Sarajevo. That's extraordinary. Do you...
It's not all stand-up. That list isn't all stand-up. It's like that also includes theater and sketch and weird performance art and stuff.
Right. Okay, but even so, that is very impressive. How do you find if audiences differ from place to place? Do you find this at all in whatever creative art you're doing?
I mean, I think the things I've been doing in those different locations have been so different from one another that it would be hard to draw any conclusions about the audiences. Sure. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I have an answer.
No, I don't. It's not a very good question. I wouldn't bother. Let's move on to your book. You've got a collection of comic drawings called The Blaring Haus.
Yeah.
Tell me about this.
My full last name, my entire surname is Zeringhaus. It's German.
Right.
And people just could not pronounce it. And so at the time I was doing these illustrations, and I just thought, I'd call my book something that rhymes with my last name so that they could figure it out. So it's Blaringhaus, Zeringhaus. That's how you say it. Calm down. It was, I think, well, it's all part of the journey of essentially I was avoiding performance for quite a long time. I thought it was a bit of an arrogant thing to do. I was probably just too nervous to do it. And so I was trying to do any other creative thing that would keep me off stage, essentially.
Yeah.
So I started doing illustrations for years and years, and they kind of moved into a bit fine art, and then I would sell these drawings.
Yeah.
Canada, and I made a zine of them. They were kind of like comic drawings. I don't know if you've ever heard of an artist called Glenn Baxter. Or
yes, I have. Yeah.
They're sort of in that vein. It's sort of old style pictures with kind of non sequitur jokes at the bottom. So it was funny art, but it didn't really have people didn't know what to do with it, really. So I started making these zines and selling them. And this publisher, Andy Brown, who's a great guy in Canada with a boutique press called Conundrum Press, found one and was just like, oh, we'd like to put a book out of this.
That's fantastic.
And, I was amazed that they wanted to do it. So I was just like, do whatever you want. And, it was fun at the time. I think it was a lot of work.
Yeah. But if you've already got them there, you're halfway there because the illustrations were already there, so good on you for doing that.
Thanks.
I've tried to get this blog published and it's just too big. It was originally going to be a book, Arichcomiclife, and I thought I might well get it printed off, but I think the blogs are the online blogs are much more immediate things, especially for comedians. So I made the decision. Do you think I had the comedian Darren Walsh on the interviews, and he uses drawings a lot in his comedy. He can draw things and then make a joke from them. Do you think you'll combine that at all, or are you just straight stand-up comedy, or have you ever thought about that?
I don't really know.
No.
I've been thinking about it because I have a master's in public art and new artistic strategies.
Wow! Congratulations. I've got an HND in business studies from Stoke-on-Trent. I mean,
hey,
there's
you know
the
what?
difference.
I think that's probably much more useful.
No, I wouldn't say so. I'm an administrator in a school. That's my job. So, but yeah. Essentially in the process of the past 15 years, I've done sketch, improv, theater, multimedia studies, sound installations, drawing, all this kind of stuff. And it would be nice to somehow meld it together, but I also do just love an hour of straight stand-up. So I don't know if I've really found, or if I will ever find, the right voice that would, be a bit more alternative or like combine a few of the other elements. I really don't know. No. I usually make the wrong decision, so. Yeah. Well, no. The sky is your limit. I'm telling you, you've got all these irons in the fire. Who knows? The other creative thing that I've done, other than this blog, the only other thing was I wrote a script, a play, which myself and my mate put on for Comic Relief, and I wrote it for the Edinburgh Fringe. It was only a half hour long. And I wrote this play, so it was like monologue scene. And when I wrote the monologue, I ran out the first night that we put it on to the audience, and I completely forgot the monologue, and I was like a rabbit in headlights, and I'd written it.
Oh my God, it's the worst feeling in the world.
That has anything like that happened to you with stand-up comedy? Do you wing it? I mean, it's
like a pit of despair opens up inside you. It's this abyss where for the audience it probably feels like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
For you, it just feels like a lifetime.
I was like a rabbit in headlights.
It's like someone's dropped you out of the sky. You don't know what you just said. You don't know what you're doing. It's terrible. Yes, that's happened. But I'm not sure anyone would have noted.
No.
A lot of things of like shuffling things in the wrong order, where you just get off stage, you go, damn it, like it didn't work as well. I've had a few I had one gig that was, I mean, horrendous. Like,
Oh dear.
I was too new to do it. I was told to come and do essentially it was a cabaret evening, and that was my my first experience of being on a show that wasn't all stand-ups. And so I didn't really understand that if you are the only stand-up, you have to get people on board with stand-up before you just start your stand-up. Because they've just been watching a drag queen they've been watching someone with a cow head on dancing around, and they're not ready. They're not ready for this. So I did a very strange, I think I had to do half an hour or something, and I did like 15 minutes of stand-up and then switched into a character, and the audience was just looking at me like, what are you doing? And it was a big theater, and it was a paid job. And they were so on board with the whole show, but not me.
Dear me. But,
and it was my fault for sure, because I just didn't know. It was too early. I didn't know what I was doing, really.
I always say, well, I always say it's very true that this blog is an enthuse to all the comedians who get up and actually have a go. And I had a go myself once at stand-up comedy, and it was daunting. It was a gong show, but it was for old folk. It was for old people. It couldn't be worse. And I walked out onto the stage with this script, and the first thing I said to them was, there was 3 people in the crowd, and I said, people think I look like the skier Eddie the Eagle Edwards, but I can't see the resemblance myself, thinking that would get a laugh. One old bloke at the back just told me when to fuck off, gonged me off after about 10 seconds, walked off to my own footsteps, and the promoter said, have another go, and I walked back on. Similar thing happened, and I said, I don't know about that, I don't know about stand-up comedy, but I'll certainly support them forevermore, so it is one of the most challenging things to do, but when you do it right, which you do, there is no doubt there is something special about your performances. It's wonderful to see, so thank you very much for that. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
Oh my God, these types of questions stress me out so much. I have a terrible memory.
Did you grow up with stand-up comedy?
Sorry?
Did you grow up with stand-up comedy? Did you have it in the house?
Not really. Well, my mom was from Streatham. She's from here.
Right.
So we had a lot of Monty Python and Fawlty Towers and and all the Keeping Up Appearances, any show that was from here.
Yeah.
And that the comic tone from here always has felt much more familiar than anything from Canada or anywhere else. Anyway, the first comic that I loved that was my own choice was Eddie Izzard, and I was like a little 9-year-old, and I just loved him. And I got to meet him in Edinburgh, which was amazing.
Wow.
It was just like a nice little full circle thing. So he was the first one that I remember. As of now, I would say, I don't know. I really like John Mulaney, of course. I really like Bill Burr, Stuart Lee, Jim Key, Woody Allen. Anyway, I can enjoy so many things. Dylan Moran, David O'Doherty, Alfie Brown's hilarious. New people, or not new people, but people who maybe are less known. I haven't laughed at anything. I think I haven't laughed at anything as much as I laughed at that John Luke Roberts show from a few years ago that was All I Want to Do Is Dump 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 with a Bump. You remember that one? It was the MIA song. All I Want to Do Is Gunshot, whatever it was. It was the one about the Spice Girls babies, I think. And it was the only show I saw twice. I thought it was hilarious.
That's fantastic. What brilliant choices. That's great.
Don't know. I mean, I could go on for literally.
Yeah. I mean,
I will be annoyed with myself. It's 100% guaranteed I'll be annoyed with myself after this is finished. 500 people. Anyway.
My first ever show, I was 6 or 7, and it was with the family at Scarborough, which is in the north of England, on holiday, and we went to see Les Dawson, and I thought he was hysterical. And then a year later we went to see Tommy Cooper, and I got the bug. And there is something more where you can just twiddle a hat or a bow tie or whatever, and it was just magical to see. And then I went through the 80s with the alternative boom. I saw Ben Elton and Rick Mayall at college, and French and Saunders and Frank Skinner and everybody like that. And then of course Edinburgh from the 2000s onwards. So I just love it. And to find new talent, that's another big thing. Like yourself, it's just wonderful to watch them grow. I first saw the comedian Harry Hill 30 years ago in a pub in Crouch End in London, downstairs the King's Head, and he walked on and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry I'm late. I had to have a testicle brought down," and everybody laughed. And then he said, "From Derby." And to this day, it's my favourite opening line to any gig. And when I met him 30 years later, he said, "Oh, I still do that all the time." So, it's just magical catching great comedians like yourself and watching them fly. Also as well, following on from that, like me, do you go to a lot of comedy gigs as a member of the audience?
When there aren't viruses around.
Yes.
I really like going to see things a lot. But I don't have very much money.
Right, fine, okay.
So I go see as much as I can. I tend to prefer to go see maybe an hour, someone's hour,
sure,
rather than going out for sort of a mixed bill evening. But maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe I should start going to mixed bills. Yeah, I love watching everything. Yeah. If
you're on a bill of comedians, do you tend to stay and watch them all, or do you sometimes have 2 or 3 gigs a night?
I would love to have 2 or 3 gigs a night. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 gigs a night. Usually, I will stay and watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think because it's only been a couple months since we've been back. Generally, I'll stay and watch.
Yeah. There is a section in my blog called "The Ones That Got Away." That's the reason why I asked the question. And I've written about 25 comedians who have either passed on or haven't been able to see. And I'm always fascinated about what other comedians who they like and who inspired them. How have you found online gigs as opposed to live gigs? Have you done many online gigs? What do you think of them?
I was really avoiding them.
Right.
As long as possible.
Right.
Because it did feel like when the pandemic hit, people ran straight to them, and it felt to me like, there's something global going on, and maybe we should be processing it a little bit before we start doing the same jokes we were just doing.
Yeah. There is that. Yeah.
I delayed it for a while, and then the few that I did do, maybe it was just a fluke, but there tended to be a delay where you couldn't hear you would do a joke, and then it would be about 5 seconds before the audience, you would hear them laughing.
Sure,
so you ended up kind of having to turn the audio down, so it was a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah.
So I don't think I mastered that yet. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I did not enjoy it as much as live shows, obviously. I don't know. I'd like to. I suppose it's going to become part of the list of
norm,
that you
maybe.
do, the part of the norm. Yeah. Come on, we're going to go into another lockdown, aren't we?
Yeah, of course.
Better get good at
it. I totally agree with you. I think from my point of view, they're a very good super sub. They're a very good substitution. But when they first started off, I used to go all the time to different ones in the week, and a lot of them didn't have any audio. So because I had a loud laugh, I would sit here looking at 4 walls, and I thought I was going to get taken away because they couldn't hear me laughing. But then they opened it up, and the ones that did it could nail it were getting the timings quite right, because they could talk to the audience and they could engage and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But you can't beat, for me, going to a live gig with your friends and just sitting there and saying, right, please entertain me, because it's of the moment. You never know what's going to happen in the room. And that's the magic of it.
Yeah, I mean, there were some people who really did an amazing job on the Zoom, and they had it wasn't stand up. It was a much more conversational sort of a tone, and maybe a chat about the day, and that seemed to be the that worked the best, didn't it? I saw something Tim Key did that was really funny. It was like,
what a great comedian!
Oh my God, I love him.
He's brilliant, isn't he? He's so good.
Yeah, and he'd done kind of almost an art house situation where he was doing poems and then he showed movies and then he did this. It obviously had been choreographed, and that was quite nice.
Yeah, brilliant. Just before we go, and I could talk to you all day. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I really hope you have. You've been a fantastic guest. Is there anything else you would like to say? Do you have any live gigs coming up? Do you have any podcasts? Do you have anywhere where people can find you on social media or anything like that?
I do make a lot of silly videos on Instagram.
Right.
Which is my name, Clair_Haus, Haus. That's a place that people can find me.
Sure.
And I tend to advertise gigs there or on Twitter or on my website, which is just my name as well. So probably the website, because we don't know when this podcast is coming out, probably the website is the best place to see upcoming gigs.
And
because
and it will obviously be up and coming and ongoing, and yeah,
and there's some fun sort of things in the background, maybe TV style things that are coming, but I can't really talk about that.
Wow. Have you had much experience of being on television here at all, or no bit parts or anything like that?
No, I would love to do. I miss acting stuff as well. Like comedic acting is really fun.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't really done anything like that here yet.
Well, please.
I'm available.
Yes, of course. Yes. Available to do these bit roles. But please carry on doing your stand-up comedy. I think you're an absolute talent. You really are. You make me laugh so much, and you've been a joy to talk to. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much. Thanks for being a great laugh.
My pleasure. All the best to you. Thank you.